The space race is over, and I'll never get to the moon. By Schistosity. Read by My Lost and Found. Summary. The Garrison trio stumble into trouble on an undercover mission after they uncover a surprising and eerily familiar piece of space junk. But with the harsh reminder of how far they are from home comes an opportunity to, in a small way, help it. A fic about kids who love space, miss home, and don't know correct museum etiquette. This fic is approximately 15,000 words long and 5 chapters. As always, link to this fic is in the description below, and on with the story. Chapter 1. Pioneer. When Pidge was 5, her father took her to a lecture at Columbia University. Her mother had been busy, and they hadn't been able to get a babysitter. So naturally, Sam Holt took his daughter to his master's class in astrophysics. She sat in the front row of the lecture hall by the door, sitting on her father's bag so she could see over the large desk, her feet dangling loosely in the air. The student next to her was a woman with curly brown hair who helped Pidge lean her crayons on the desk while she colored in a picture of Donald Duck. Poorly. But that only lasted a few minutes. After a while, Pidge's eyes drifted from Donald to the notes the woman was taking. They were fine, sharp pen strokes that splashed massive strings of numbers and letters across the page. Pidge didn't understand it, but she loved the shapes and the rapidness with which the girl translated Sam Holt's words into printed form. Then she began to listen. He talked about space and flight and navigation, using big words like algorithms and trajectory that Pidge didn't know. He spoke a lot of things a 5-year-old couldn't understand, but he spoke with a passion she most definitely could. He drew big, extravagant diagrams on the chalkboard of planets and moons, and threw up huge projections of equations and rocket ships. He explained new methods being developed for spaceflight, ways to half the time it would take to get probes to Kerberos. Pidge knew that word. That was her dad's work. His word. Kerberos. She sat starry-eyed, picturing the world he described. She was going to go there one day. Even at 5, she knew. She was going to go to space. When Pidge was 10, she found out her father was giving a lecture at Caltech on the Kerberos program's propulsion research. "It isn't going to be like the high school classes you're taking," her dad said. "These students are all potential astronauts." She had gone anyway. This time, she sat in the middle of the lecture hall, though she still needed to roll up her sweater and sit on it to be high enough for the desk. She brought her laptop and took notes the whole time her father spoke, latching on to every word. She only felt a little awkward when the older students sat down around her. Space, the stars, the ships that sailed through them. That was what she was here for. To picture them, to make the calculations in her head. One day, she thought, she'd be sitting here as an actual student. The thought made her ecstatic. "Did you get that last bit about reducing orbital decay?" Near the end of the lecture, the man next to her spoke to her quietly. "I missed the equation." Pidge looked up at the man. He was tall and stocky, with dark hair, but his eyes were cheerful. Yeah." Pidge was a bit shocked to be spoken to, but she leaned over and expertly scribbled her father's equation onto the man's book. He smiled. After the lecture, the man stopped her. "Thanks for before. I'm Shiro," said the man, offering his hand in what struck Pidge as a very adult gesture. She took it. "Katie," she said. "Katie Holt." Shiro grinned and snapped his fingers. "Makes sense." He picked up his bag and began to walk off. "I'll probably be seeing you around then, Katie." Pidge was 14 when the Kerberos program was shut down, when her father, brother, and Shiro all disappeared. It enraged her. She should have been there with them. Maybe she could have stopped whatever happened. She was supposed to be smart. She had looked over her father's calculations with him. She knew they weren't wrong. She knew Matt wasn't wrong. She knew Shiro was too good of a pilot. She was smart enough to know something was up. The Garrison was going to be a hard enemy. Harder now that the reputation of Kerberos would be hanging over their heads like a bureaucratic thunderstorm. The tests were tough. She had a physical to pass, and everyone there would be at least 2 years older. But she had been sitting in on classes past her age for her whole life. This was no different. She was getting in there, getting up there. She had to. Pidge sat on a bench in a museum lobby on an alien planet, which was definitely not weird. She was fiddling with a loose piece of wiring she had brought from her spaceship, which was also not weird. God, her life was weird. Pidge, are you listening? Pidge snapped to attention at the sound of Shiro's voice. She caught his eyes with full intention of lying, but lost the will to after seeing Keith's glare from behind him. Absolutely not. Sorry. What are we doing? Shiro smiled patiently. Well, you're not doing anything. But you should be paying attention, Keith muttered. Pidge didn't mind. She had learned to filter out his sass very early on. You're going to be staying here and keeping your head down while Allura, Keith, and I head out on a mission. Shiro ignored Keith expertly. The three of them, Allura, Shiro, and Keith, were undertaking a mission out of a bad spy movie. The team had been called by the natives of this planet, the Urians, to protect one of their culture's most prized technological artifacts at a charity gala. It wasn't a traditional VOLTRON mission, but it was just another hoop they were going to have to jump through in the name of diplomacy. The Allurians would be strong allies. All right, sounds good. Pidge could handle keeping her head down. She hopped off the bench and pocketed the wires. Where are Lance and Hunk? Shiro asked. He was met with silence from Allura and Keith. They're off exploring somewhere. Pidge swooped in with an explanation. I saw them leave. Both of them? Allura sighed. Lance wandering off wasn't entirely surprising, or entirely unexpected, but Hunk seemed to have disappeared too, which was a definite cause for concern. Go find them, Pidge, please. Allura smiled, exasperated. We're going to head out now, and we need you to, as you say, hold down the fort. Pidge gave a quick thumbs up to Allura's use of an Earth colloquialism, a short salute to Shiro, and trotted off down the halls of the Yoria Museum. The museum was an interesting place. For Pidge, it was one of the most interesting she'd been in her entire time in space. It reminded her of the likes of the Smithsonian or the Johnson Space Center. It was a museum of galactic technology, so large it had spanned over a dozen huge buildings. The Allurians were extremely revered engineers, priding themselves on defining values of exploration and discovery. They had a long history of deep space exploration and celebrated their advancements in the field. The Urion Museum featured not only relics from their own space age, but relics from all over the galaxy, a collection of centuries' worth of history. Even the artifact the others were protecting that night was a piece of their groundbreaking engineering. As she searched for Lance and Hunk, Pidge passed exhibits of old satellites, the noses of alien space shuttles, and something that looked a lot like the Moonlander, except it was bright red and had a face. She began to think about Earth's own space program, and how, really, every world must have had something similar to it at one point. Even Altea, probably. Weird. It reminded her of the books she used to read with her dad about the Apollo astronauts, the likes of Armstrong and Aldrin. It had been a defining moment for mankind, her dad had said, a milestone of human discovery and exploration. Pidge got her reflection in the shiny hull of what looked like a satellite dish. She was dressed in alien clothes, with an alien weapon on her hip, looking at her human self in an alien mirror. It was a strange vignette. Don't even think about touching! A voice snapped, making Pidge jump. A six-armed, orange alien security guard glared at her. Pidge took off again, laughing to herself. If only mankind could see where we are now, she thought. Talk about a milestone of human exploration. She figured if she ever went back to Earth, they'd probably give her a medal or something. Not if, she chided herself. When? Pidge turned a corner into a larger, open part of the museum. It was circular, and about the size of a baseball diamond. Around the outside were dozens of exhibits, each displaying a varied assortment of old spacecraft. She tore her eyes away and began to search for Hunk and Lance. They weren't hard to spot. They weren't wearing paladin armor, because this was a stealth mission, but all Pidge had to do was look for their heads poking over the crowd. God, they were both so tall. She spotted them by an exhibit on the west side of the hall and walked up to them. "What's crackin'?" she asked. Only Hunk turned to look at her. Lance was still looking intently ahead through the crowd. Hunk grinned when he saw her. "Pidge, you're not going to believe what we found." "What?" But Lance was already pointing, his action cutting Pidge's query short. She followed his line of sight. An alien woman was standing with her back to the trio. She was accompanied by a child, who she was clasping very firmly by the hand, holding her against the ebb of the thick crowd. It took Pidge a moment to realize Lance wasn't indicating at the woman, but her kid. The kid was short, with light blue skin and a bald head. All of that was pretty standard for an alien, especially one on a multicultural planet. The out-of-place thing wasn't the girl. It was what the girl was looking at. A large metal panel of some kind of golden metal was hanging in the display case the girl was peering into. It was odd-looking, and that it was a little too metallic when compared to the sleek, matte, white tech the paladins had become used to on the castle. But that wasn't what made Pidge's breath catch in her throat. Unfamiliarity was unsettling, especially when you were steeped in it day after day. Pidge would often wonder if she'd ever come to think of Altean technologies as familiar. And part of her wished she wouldn't. Being among the alien every day was like being adrift in a dark sea or lost in a foreign city. No matter how many hours you put into attempting to understand your environment, it was an unshakable truth that you didn't belong there. Unfamiliarity was scary. But in that moment, Pidge learned that there was something more unsettling than total unfamiliarity. It was finding the familiar amidst it all. Emblazoned on the panel was the blue and red NASA logo. Before she could do anything, Lance grabbed Pidge's arm. "I know what you're thinking, but it's not from their ship," he said quietly, his eyebrows knitted together in concentration. "What do you mean?" Pidge hissed, tugging herself out of his grip. "What else this far out could have a goddamn NASA logo on it?" Her mind was whirring. They were so far away. Too far away from Earth for this to have ended up here accidentally. No way. It had to have come out here another way. A Galra way. Which meant a lead. It had to be. But Lance's blue eyes locked with hers. "You're serious?" "What?" she asked. "What else could it be, Lance?" "I think I might have an idea." "Well, what is it?" "Hold up. I just gotta relish in the fact I know something about space you don't." "Lance," Hunk said warningly. Okay. He waved a hand dismissively. "It's revelation." "What? Revelation? You mean..." Hunk nodded. "The missing probe." Revelation was a name Pidge knew all too well. It was the name of an ill-fated experiment, the fifth and final of the Kerberos mission, a probe her father had helped build. It was a deep space probe designed to image from the outside of the solar system. It was the farthest distance a probe would have ever flown in human history. It was a part of the Kerberos mission, launched so it could image the crew as they landed. And like her family, Revelation had disappeared over a year ago. Everyone thought Revelation had been destroyed in whatever freak accident had befallen the Kerberos crew. But concern for the unmanned probe was minimal. A 3-man disappearance was far more glamorous news. If someone had asked Pidge 5 minutes ago what she thought had happened to Revelation, new knowledge would probably lead her to say it had most likely been destroyed by the Galra. Collateral damage in the disaster that took her family. Pidge hadn't given a thought to Revelation in the past year, but that was very quickly changing. "It must have been caught up in the Galra's warp travel," Hunk said. "Or maybe they took it?" Lance posited. "Where's the rest of it?" Pidge asked. Hunk looked thoughtful. "Revelation is what, like 6 meters across? They couldn't keep the whole thing in one exhibit." "Yeah," Lance agreed. "They might be displaying it in pieces, or have the main body somewhere else." Pidge was breathless in shock. "If it disappeared with Kerberos, if it survived, then that might mean it might have gathered information on the Galra ship that took them," Lance finished. That was what probes did. They took pictures, gathered information, took samples, made records. Pidge knew Revelation well enough to know it wasn't likely, but very probable that it would have taken readings of the Galra ship that took her family. "If it has readings, we might be able to find out exactly what ship took them," Pidge muttered. "Maybe even where they went." Shiro was here. Matt was off somewhere. But her dad? He was still an unknown. "Your dad isn't going to be on the same ship he was taken on," Hunk said, almost reading her mind. Pidge visibly deflated. "But," he said, "it's definitely a valuable starting point." "So, what do we do?" Lance said. "That shit has a lock on it. No way the Orions are going to let us dismantle their exhibits." Pidge set her mouth in a determined line. She was close to something. Maybe, possibly, hopefully. But it was something a little deeper than just strategic value. Looking at such a monumental achievement of human ingenuity, locked inside a tiny, nondescript exhibit, hit at something specific and fiery inside Pidge. She remembered sitting in on her dad's classes as he explained in loving detail the schematics of the Kerberos probes, how groundbreaking they were. She remembered looking at the plans with him at night when she couldn't sleep. She remembered watching it launch with an awe and wonder she could still feel now. This wasn't Revelation's purpose. This wasn't what it was made for. It wasn't supposed to be sitting behind a glass case. It was supposed to be a tool for discovery and research. She looked at the others and could tell from their expressions they were thinking something similar. This probe belonged to them, and they were going to get it back. Okay, that's the first chapter of this fic. I love this. There's one line from this fic that absolutely fucking like resonates with me on the deepest level. This is just a really, really well written fic. Like, it's so introspective about like the best things. It just makes your mind actually think instead of just, yes, suffer characters, or yes, kick their ass characters. This just like, at least with me, it resonates on like a personal level, like unforgettable kind of level. It's in my bones now. It might not be like that for everybody, but I really love this fic, and I hope you guys are going to too. This is the first time I've recorded like a multi-chapter fic in a while, so how it's gonna go is just weekly on, normal upload day, chapters are gonna be posted. You won't get my like end commentary until the last chapter, because me personally, I'm not a big fan of multi-chapter fics where I have to like skip through every single time at the end of an episode to get to the next one if I'm like, oh wow, I'm so invested, I just can't wait for what's happening next, like when I'm binging something. So I'm only gonna do like this after the chapter discussions at the end of the first and last chapter in like a long form fic, unless it's like super long, then I might do one like every 5 or 10 chapters at the end. Just, you know, have a little word in here, word in there, but not to the point where I would find it annoying if I was listening to something. But yeah, that's how that's gonna go. But yeah, I hope you guys will enjoy this. Link to the fic is in the description below. Even if, you know, you're waiting for more chapters to come out, you could still go leave a kudos and a comment on the first chapter for the original author, because this is great. And, you know, comments make authors so happy. But yeah, I will see you guys next time.